Well, I did not expect to be talking about this fixture this season, but tomorrow Watford are set to face Manchester City away at the Etihad, who are arguably one of the best teams in world football. And little old Watford are travelling up to Manchester to take on Pep Guardiola's side. But before we get into my thoughts on the game, make sure to hit subscribe down below, leave a like on the video, and most importantly, let me know your score predictions in the comment section down below. We'll come to mine at the very end of the video. Right, let's get into the game. And I want to start by talking about Watford's opposition for tomorrow in Manchester City. Now, if you're a football fan, you'll all be aware that a very high-profile game was played in the Premier League on Super Sunday yesterday afternoon here in the UK. It was Manchester City versus Arsenal in what you could call an early title decider clash, if you will, albeit we are still very early on in the season. And it certainly was a very entertaining game. Lots happened, especially in the first half. Manchester City went ahead through their main man up front in Erling Haaland. The great running behind and a lovely finish from Erling Haaland actually as well. Arsenal then equalised through Ricardo Calafiori with a lovely finish into the far corner that Ederson was nowhere near saving. And then just before half-time, Arsenal actually went ahead against Manchester City from a corner, from a set-piece, through Gabriel heading at the back post. But the controversy in the game come just before half-time with Leandro Trossard getting sent off for Arsenal, which meant for the entire second half, Manchester City, who are a good side anyway at breaking people down, were playing against 10-man Arsenal, who quite literally did not attempt to attack at all. They almost had a 6-3 formation, 6 players in almost a straight line, and then 3 players ahead of them, which was really odd to watch. I thought Arsenal might be a little bit more adventurous, but Arsenal quite literally sat back the entirety of that second half. And talking about Manchester City, generally in that second half, I actually wasn't that impressed. I thought Manchester City would be better at breaking Arsenal down, especially with the man advantage. But Ruben Dias seemed to have a lot of the ball, as did Manuel Akanji. And Manchester City didn't seem to really get many of their creative players involved. Phil Foden come off the bench quite late on, which I was surprised about. Pep Guardiola kept the back four on for quite a while as well in that second half, even when they had that man advantage. So in terms of Manchester City's performance against Arsenal, don't get me wrong, they were still very impressive, especially for a period at the beginning of that first half. But during the second half itself, and the way Arsenal defended, which I hope Watford have taken some lessons from going into our game, I wasn't too impressed by City. Now, looking at the starting 11 Manchester City put out yesterday, they had Ederson, Kyle Walker, Dias, Akanji, Gvardiol in their back line. Looking at the midfield, they had Bernardo Silva, Rodri, who went off with a serious injury, Ilkay Gundogan. And then up front, they had Savio, Erling Haaland, Jeremy Doku as well. So a very strong starting Manchester City team. But I think from a Watford perspective, we really have to look at the Manchester City substitute bench to see who we will be facing on Tuesday night. Now, I've seen some Watford fans suggest that we may be facing Manchester City's under-18s and under-21s due to their fixture congestion. Of course, only playing Arsenal just yesterday as I record this. But I still think we're going to see a really strong City side. Yes, there may be a few under-21 players sprinkled in there as well. But generally, looking at the bench, that featured looking at the players that are on the bench, I should say, against Arsenal, there's still some very, quality players on there. I'm looking at John Stones, Mateo Kovacic, Jack Grealish, Phil Foden, Stefan Ortega, I'm sure will probably come into goal over Ederson. Matheus Nunes needs minutes. Rico Lewis, James McAtee. So looking at Manchester City's bench, they still have some absolutely, world-class, top-quality Premier League players there, which I think for me is very concerning. Now, in terms of the Watford team and Watford injury news going into this game, I firstly want to touch on the injury news because I think that's what you guys want to hear first. And Tom Cleverley has come out today and said that Daniel Bachmann and Francisco Sierralta will not be involved at all. Of course, both of them players were substituted against Norwich at the weekend with what appears to be a non-serious muscular issue. So hopefully not long-term injuries for both Bachmann and Sierralta, but of course they will not be risked at all against Manchester City. The surprising injury news we heard today was that Ryan Andrews, our right wing back, will be unavailable, as also he has a slight muscular injury, which they don't want to risk, of course, ahead of facing Sunderland at Vicarage Road this weekend. So aside from them three players, everyone else is available. Now, if I was Tom Cleverley looking at the Watford squad going into this game, I think you have to, for me personally, reward the players who got you to this round in the first place. Now, I'm talking about people like Kwadwo Bar, Mamadou Doumbia, Tom Ince, James Morris, Matty Pollock, Jonathan Bond, people like that who played against MK Dons and Plymouth in the earlier rounds. Give them a chance to shine against Manchester City and see what they can do. At least that's what I would do if I was the Watford manager currently. Now, Tom Cleverley could do the complete opposite to that and play Watford's better players in Georgie Shafatatse. Of course, we're slightly hindered in the striker position with Daniel Jefferson cup-tied after playing for Bournemouth earlier in the season. But Tom Cleverley, as I said, could go one of two ways. He could reward the younger players and the more inexperienced players. You got Watford to this stage originally, but of course if you do that you risk the score maybe being slightly higher than you want it to be in terms of goals conceded, or as I said, you can play the likes of Chafadatse, Tom Delly, Musa Sissoko, Ryan Porteous, for example, Angelo Ogbonna. Play your more experienced players and maybe give yourselves a chance, if there is even a chance, Watford could beat Manchester City. And talking about our record against Manchester City before we move on to my score prediction, I think in the last 15 games, Watford have lost all 15 against Manchester City. So not a good record at all. I think the last time Watford beat Manchester City, and this has shown how young I am, was even before I was born, back in 2001. So it's been a very long time. Obviously, I'm hoping a miracle can happen, but if we're going to sit here and be realistic, I think a good night for Watford would be if we could keep it 4 goals or less conceded, I would say. I think would be a good night for Watford, coming away relatively unscathed from the Etihad. But in terms of my score prediction, I'm going to go with 2 predictions, actually. I'm going to go with one with my head and one with my heart. So in my head, I say this could be an absolute travesty. It could be a cricket score. I'm going to go maybe 6-0 to City. But in my heart, and as a biased Watford fan, I'm going to say 1-1, and then we take it to penalties. So, that's what I'll go with my heart. But in my head, look, it's not going to be an easy task. They are one of the best teams in world football. They still have a fantastic, plethora of players who don't even start for them, as I mentioned earlier, as well as some fantastic talents coming through their academy. You remember Cole Palmer barely got any minutes at Manchester City before moving to Chelsea, and now he's tearing it up, being one of the best players in the Premier League. So I wouldn't even underrate their academy talent coming through as well. They have a fantastic setup. Yes, of course, they have the big news story about the 115 charges looming over them. But that doesn't take away about the fact that they are a ridiculous footballing side, and one that I do enjoy watching on occasion, but I'm not looking forward to facing tomorrow night. So that's my thoughts on the game. As I said, let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. Don't forget to subscribe to The Watford Way. Make sure to check us out on all our social media channels, both here on YouTube, on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. And make sure to join me here tomorrow night for a live match watch along as Watford travel up to Manchester to take on City at the Etihad Stadium. Thank you for watching and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.